Good morning. It is 9:30 on July 18, 2018. For our regular Ottawa City Commission meeting, let's start with the roll call, please.
Mayor Skidmore.
Present.
Commissioner Kaler.
Present.
Commissioner Graves.
Present.
Commissioner Jorgensen. Commissioner Wygant.
Present.
I want to welcome everybody here in the Commission chambers as well as on KWFA Radio, Government Access Channel, and Facebook. So if you can't reach us or watch us, it's your own fault, I would say, with all those different means of communication going on right now. So let's begin with our Pledge of Allegiance, followed by invocation by Pastor Kent Matthews. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, we hope that we might begin this council meeting with gratitude. Gratitude that we have such a desirable city to live in. Gratitude that we have such wonderful people to call neighbors. Gratitude that we have the freedom to govern ourselves and the freedom to elect our representatives. Gratitude that we have the right to vote and the freedom to speak out for what we believe. Grant that these leaders today might have the wisdom to see things as you do, the grace to value the views of others, the humility to promote the needs of others, and may everybody present listen to others with compassion and insight. May we set aside prejudice and petty self-interest, and may we make decisions based on wisdom and justice and the common good. And when we're finished, may we have the sense that your will has been done and not just our will. We ask these things in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Kent. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll begin with the consent agenda. We have the minutes from the July 25th study session, July 2nd special call study session, and July 5th special call regular meeting, along with the agenda approval. Do we have a motion?
I move we approve those, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner, okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We'll move on to item number 8, which is public comments today.
No one's registered.
None here. Go on to number 9, which is the declaration. At this time, I'd like to give the commissioners a chance to declare any conflict or communication they've had that might influence their ability to consider today's issues impartially. I think we're good there. All right, and before I go on to new business, I want to bring Michael Hafley to the podium for a moment.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I'd like to introduce Kevin McCurdy. He's our new airport manager. Kevin is a graduate of Ottawa High School, Flint Hills Technical College, K-State Polytechnic. When he graduated from K-State Polytechnic, he received a Bachelor of Science degree in aviation. He's logged over 2,400 hours of flight time, 375 hours of flight instruction. He's actively engaged with the Aviation Explorers, teaching ground and flight school. He's currently working on an MBA from Ottawa University and is set to graduate in the spring of 2019. So far he's been a tremendous asset to the airport, and I look forward to working with him in the future. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kevin to say a few words.
You bet, Kevin.
I want to thank Mike first. He's been such a pleasure to work with, and I'm happy to have this opportunity to work out at the airport and to see it grow. I've been involved out at the airport in some capacity one way or another for several years now, and so being now given the airport manager position, I'm really excited to unleash some of that potential I see out there. We've got some real exciting things going on with the Aviation Explorers. Just this month I had 2 students do their first solo flight, and that was a big moment for them and a big moment for the group as well. They had found that airplane in a junkyard, and through some hard work they got that thing flying again over about 2 years. And then with the pathways coming up with the Ottawa High School, I'm hoping that we can get some more interest in the youth out there and continue to see it grow. So thanks again.
Great. Well, congratulations, Mr. McCurdy. Yeah, with your pedigree and your education, we got a great pick, it looks like. So congratulations, Mike, to the airport board as well for this pick. And also just want to say about the article in the paper, that really was exciting to see these young people involved in aviation at early age like this and be able to do what they've done. So that's exciting to see, and I appreciate all your work and effort in that as well. So
Thank you.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Glad to have you.
Good to have you.
We'll move on to item number 10.
Proclamation recognizing Access Awareness Day.
This proclamation celebrates the 28-year anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was passed to ensure the civil rights of citizens with disabilities. Kyle Trendle, Chairman of the Accessibility Advisory Board, will accept the nomination, but first we'll have it read by Commissioner Emily Graves.
The proclamation reads as follows. Whereas the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, was passed on July 26, 1990 to ensure the civil rights of citizens with disabilities, and whereas the City of Ottawa of the State of Kansas affirms the principles of equality, accessibility, and inclusion are essential for ensuring that all community members have access to opportunities and the ability to fully participate in community life as set forth for the State of Kansas and embodied in the ADA, the laws of the State of Kansas, and ordinances of Ottawa, Kansas. And whereas numerous organizations in the City of Ottawa and the State of Kansas work with constituents and communities to bring forth the promise of hope and freedom that is envisioned by the passage of the ADA. And whereas the City of Ottawa formed an Accessibility Advisory Board in 2013 with current members Casey Brady, Marcia Hermick, Chris Patton, Lisa Rossman, Kyle Trendle, Ruthann Wasco, Tammy Womack, Josh Robinson, and John Fritz to enhance accessibility efforts in Ottawa. And whereas accessibility should be part of all aspects of community life, physical, social, and economic, including employment, transportation, recreation, housing. And whereas we all have a role to play in ensuring that our communities are as accessible and inclusive as possible. And whereas approximately 12.5% of the population has a disability, which often impacts their ability to effectively access services and shopping. And whereas July 26th, 2018 celebrates the 28th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act and Access Awareness Day, with Access Awareness Day. Now, therefore, the governing body of the City of Ottawa, Kansas, does hereby recognize the rights of all individuals with disabilities and the importance of ensuring that they have access to opportunities that are important to them and that give their lives meaning, and to all observing July 26, 2018 as Access Awareness Day in the City of Ottawa. Signed this 18th day of July 2018 by our Mayor, Michael B. Skidmore.
And let's get a picture. I'd like to get all the board members that are here in this, if I could.
As Ms. Graves has said, it will be July 26, 1990, that the Americans with Disabilities has went into effect. Like the curb cuts in Ottawa helps when I go down the steps. As before, when my son and I, when he was little and I tried to go down a curb, I couldn't because I'd have to try to find somewhere else to go. And so these help having myself and other people going down the steps in Ottawa.
That's great.
Mayor, Commissioners, I appreciate you having us here this morning. Thank you very much for this, for recognizing our hard work as a board. Wendy will have a presentation here shortly on some of the things that we've done over the last few years. But a couple things that I wanted to just kind of touch on, what the board does, what the Accessibility Advisory Board does. We work together and to advise and recommend to the City Council as well as city staff for future accessibility to certain projects things that are coming up. We also help with some of the technical assistance. There's some of us that have some background that we can lend some assistance on that as well. And we always like to be a little bit a part of the projects before implementation as well. So it's kind of, we're just an extension of that staff when they can actually let us review that information, and we can get some information from different sides of backgrounds. We've got those that deal with sight impairment as well as mobile impairment. So we try to touch on all different aspects. But I really appreciate you guys taking the time to have us here and recognize this. And I'll turn this over to Wendy.
Okay, thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.
At different times, different staff members have been the ADA coordinator, and currently that is my role. And I have worked with the Accessibility Advisory Board since their inception, but it's great to have folks that help us in a lot of different ways. And so we thought it would be appropriate to kind of update you as well as the public as to some of the things that have happened with our transition plan. So a transition plan is actually for the city organization to ensure that our buildings and facilities are accessible. And many people probably don't know, but even if a building is not open to the public, because we employ people there, and ADA was originally part of making it equal opportunity to work, that included the employees. So there may be things in here that people go, I don't know why they did that, but it was because it would be an opportunity for us to improve our facilities in case any of our employees need those sort of accommodations. So wanted to first let you know that it's been 8 years since we first developed our first transition plan. In that we had a consultant come in who surveyed most of our facilities. We just recently discovered there were actually a couple that we have not had done, but most of our facilities. In addition to that, it wasn't just about the buildings, and we want people in the community to know it isn't always about just infrastructure or barriers that are physical. There can be other barriers that need to be addressed. So in our case, we had a review of our personnel policies and the way that we conduct application process, as well as, for example, on the building inspection side, part of our challenge or duty is to make sure that the contractors and building owners have done what they need to do for accessibility. And in that 2011, we discovered that there were a few things that were being misunderstood by both the contractor field as well as inspection staff. So that gave us an opportunity to improve that. And at the time, we also did employee training. We've also had training with the board a couple times over the years. We had re-reviews in 2012, 13, and 14, and additional training in that time period. And then from there, what we were challenged to do a couple years ago was really update the text of the goal sections of the plan. We would let people know that there are several facilities that are completely within compliance on the plan. That's the fire department, the police department, the power plant, the water plant, sorry, there's a missing T there, and the water reclamation plant. We have some additional work yet to go at the airport terminal, at the Carnegie Cultural Center, here in City Hall and the library, as well as the Don Woodward and the OMA of the actual buildings. Some of the projects left you'll see are a bit, well, they're a bit more expensive or complicated. So some of those we wanted to let people know require really an engineer review or an architect review at this point. And that's because it requires a wall to move, a facility to be significantly changed, or something that could in fact be structural. Now, I would tell you that if we fully complied with this transition plan, we'd actually be ahead of what's required by law, okay? Because we aren't doing changes in those buildings. We are trying to fully comply even in advance of them. Typically, when you do a remodel is when you try to come into compliance. We at the city are actually trying to come into compliance absent any remodel work. And so that's why we want to have some of these reviewed. It's possible that a few of these won't be feasible until there is such structural work ongoing, and some of them that may never happen. But then what are our alternatives? For example, in the library, There is a wall that is too close, creating a hallway that is too narrow on the way to a restroom. So the alternative that Clancy Moore did last year when we remodeled or added a bathroom down there was to make a different restroom that is fully accessible, but on that level. So that's an alternative. It's not necessarily the most inexpensive, but it is appropriate given the number of people that use that facility. And there are certain impairments that would make it a challenge unless that restroom is right available. Certain kinds of conditions, you can't wait for the elevator and then go up to another floor. You need to access a facility right away. Some things are just significantly expensive, and that doesn't mean we won't do it. It just means that it's going to take us longer to get to it. And so we're continuing to look at that. And one of those is an additional restroom on the third floor or second floor here at City Hall. Now, we've been compliant because we had one restroom within the building all this time. But we felt like it was appropriate, again, to have one on each level, given we could have meetings going in each facility. And I would tell you that this first floor restroom is in constant use. So. In the parks and the parking lots, we are complete at the swimming pool, except there's one engineering question there. At Heritage, Kansas, we've got the parking lots downtown, and the parking lots at parks are in compliance with the transition plan. There are a few places that we have not yet fully made compliant or transitioned. The City Park gazebo, and if anyone can put that picture in their head, they're going to understand why, and it may not be the best thing to do that to that actual structure. But we do need to have a place where we could hold such concerts and things accessibly, and so that may be something that would be an opportunity with Legacy Square over time. Access to Dietrich just requires a little bit of, Dietrich Cabin just requires a little bit of modification there. There's still some ongoing work at Cox Field. Forest Park, it's primarily walkways to each of the shelters. We have an accessible shelter, or in fact two, but we want to get to where they all are. And as we're going to talk to you a little bit about tables and benches later, I'll continue that theme. Freedom Park, we had some connections there we want to make, as well as some additional structures that are needed there. And then Haley Park, you cannot access the landing where, again, sometimes announcements are made, stories are read, bands play. But we do want to celebrate that we believe we have made significant progress in the 7 years since this plan, because we're at 75% complete on all of the noted items. And that includes additional items that were done in those years 12, 13, and 14. In addition to that, the projects and things that the city has done since then have also been evaluated. So, for example, when we added the Forest Park Playground, when we added Kansas Park, those were things that have been done actually for inclusiveness, but they also were evaluated to be sure that we actually did comply with new projects. We have had, with the board, we've had more citizens contact. One of the good things about having the board member is that people sometimes reach out to them. In addition to that, the publicity that we have done over the last several years has also resulted in additional calls to staff. Sometimes that's clarification, sometimes it's just reaching out to a business on behalf of a citizen, and sometimes it is just asking for some additional things. For example, Marcia shared with me one time something that someone had shared with her about some facilities at OU. They too had a compliant restroom, but somebody asked for some additional handrails, and they were happy to do that. And sometimes it is just those additional things we can do to make life easier for each other. In addition to that, we've had ongoing sidewalk and curb changes, as you know. And we're going to talk a little more about that. So this board has been met monthly for a while, and they developed, for example, an event checklist for accessibility. So anybody out there that's planning an event wants to be sure that they've considered what might be good for those that would need to be thought of more critically. We'd be happy to provide it. It is on our webpage. The members were read in the proclamation, but they began meeting quarterly just in 2016, and primarily now we review the plan every year. We're going to continue to do training. This year we're going to do training this fall, and then we try to do at least one promotion activity, and this year it's this proclamation and presentation. And then we try to, we've gotten great involvement now. Our board has more members across other institutions, and we hope that that will
create a sense for them to create their own or modify their own transition plan. Curb cuts is something that the Public Works Department has been working on, and we wanted to show you because now they're starting to enhance their work with use of technology. And so they are mapping. This is an example of a section of town on the north side, and I don't want you to worry about where is it and how are we, but basically what they are doing is checking each corner. Green means it's compliant. Yellow means it has a ramp, but the ramp may not be compliant. Either doesn't have truncated domes or maybe at a different slope. Red means there's still a stand-up curb there. And so their goal is to do that at every intersection in the community so that we can visually see where improvements are. The first priority is for if citizens call or communicate with us in some fashion that they have a route that they are trying to navigate and they cannot, our first priority is to address those routes. So sometimes people may see them removing curbs in an area and go, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense because it's like not downtown, and maybe other people think downtown is first priority, and downtown is important to us. But if somebody else is needing to access something on 15th or 13th Street, we want to make sure that they can do that. If they're trying to get to the hospital or get to a park, we want to make sure that they can. So that's our first priority. Second is then intersections or routes that go to those public spaces or places that we are already on a path of. But this new data will really help us. And as you know, when we've done projects like 15th Street, the Safe Routes to School projects, it's the projects with some of our partners like USD 290 has done a number of sidewalks, and that's resulted in a number of curb cuts also being retrofitted and proper. That we continue to look at that. So then we may have on occasion a place where an intersection is done except for one corner. So this mapping will help us see that. But my thanks to the Public Works Department, and I'm sure yours, is this is going to be ongoing for some time. They've done over 50, I think, intersections, but there's a lot of stand-up curb in our community, and it'll take some years to finish that. But they are addressing it, and the street superintendent is Justin McCurdy, and so my thanks to them for making sure that they work on that as regularly as they can. And so that's the end of our presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Wendy?
Good job.
It really is. You know, I think you really have to put on a different set of eyes. There are buildings on there I had never even thought about that being a hindrance to some of our citizens, and so it's important to have the advisory board to put that input in for you.
And one of the things I failed to mention is that we also have done several times is how we're compliant electronically. So our webpage, our Facebook, our sounds, hence the closed captioning, that was another thing that was addressed early on. And so a lot of other organizations, I'm really proud of our organization for doing this, and I would really encourage any other organization in the community. As it was said, it's been 28 years, nearly 30 years. It's a human tendency to resist change at the beginning. We are nowhere near the beginning now. And so we need to encourage people to not see this as something they have to do, but something that they ought to do in order for all of our citizens to participate in any activity, whether it be shopping or visit to the park or to their hairdresser, that they be able to do that.
Absolutely right. Thank you, Wendy. Very good presentation. Thank you all for the board members for your service and for being here today. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 12.
Request for approval of resolution to set the time, date, and place for condemnation hearing.
This resolution sets the time and date, place, and provides notice of hearing to consider condemnation of a single-family structure at 420 South Locust for Wednesday on September 5th, 2018 at 7 o'clock. And Mr. Sherman, you have that? Go right ahead.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. Good to see you today. I remember as a young inspector in 1991 when the ADA came down, and when Wendy mentioned that about change and resistance, I don't think people have any idea what that meant. Just so much as changing door hardware was like going to battle. But now look where we're at now, where plans I receive daily are near fully compliant, and there's not even a mention to some of the architectural changes and barriers that we see. So
That's a good point. You're right.
come quite a long ways. This structure first came to us in 2016. Staff was alerted to the environmental area around this dwelling, and we became involved in abating it by mowing and cleaning it up. And so after that, it sat a little while, and then later that fall, we received a complaint from one of the neighbors, and we started our normal monitoring process. Fast forward to spring of 2017, we received another complaint about it. Still had not received any attention by the owner. Both our building inspector and our property codes inspector visited the site, and we generated a notice to the owner at that time detailing the issues we found with the structure. In that year, the owner started their own mowing and maintenance of the exterior site, but the structure remained untouched. That summer, in late July, the owner did submit a building permit application to repair only the porch, the front porch facing Locust, and we processed it, but spoke to the owner, reminding them that they need to be a licensed contractor or actually occupy and reside within the dwelling. And we'd be glad to help them with any contractor contacts. We always carry a list for those that are out of town with local contractors to help them out. And it just kind of went by the wayside. The owner never came back to us. But it remained on our list to keep monitoring. Now to this spring, the neighborhood once again contacted us, and we paid a visit to the site. And on May 9th, the neighborhood generated a petition to city staff to have the structure renovated or removed. We received 10 signatures, and all appeared to be valid, and staff went out and visited the site again and determined that it would now be on our 2018 abatement list for your consideration. We've looked into the past. The taxes are 4 years past due. We cannot find any utility connection for the last 4 years either. Parts of the structure remains open. We have animals and neighborhood four-legged creatures coming and going, much to the discern to the neighbors, which I can understand. There's some weather-tight issues to this dwelling. The pictures, I'll do a quick through the PowerPoint, but the pictures don't really, it's hard for me to do this, but if you're up close to the structure, you can see the ceilings are falling in on the inside. It's in terrible condition on the inside. It's clearly not habitable, and the work needed to bring it up to some kind of standard occupy would be significant. But I'll just show you a quick rundown of what we're looking at. This is the street's view. The porch, it doesn't look from the streetscape that bad, but the ceiling is falling down, all the soffit fascia boards, the guttering is always collapsing. The porch itself is really not something suitable to walk on. This is the back of the dwelling. It's even in worse condition. There's weeds and volunteer growth surrounding the structure, inhibiting, really the structure itself to remain in a good condition. This is kind of more of the southeast corner of it, looking back. The doors are ajar slightly, and animals, there's windows that are out. Let's see, on the back, they're able to access in, but the structure has some movement to it, allowing it to kind of shift a little bit over time, which we find most structures of this age would if they're not receiving some kind of care or upgrade or maintenance. The lap board siding is really in terrible shape. It's been in need of addressing for some time. Also with the guttering system, there's a lot of, it's not really functioning as it should at the structure, so it allows a lot of leaking. Of course, we have vegetation growing up on the first floor roof there, and you can see some of the holes under the lattice work. That's where the animals are gaining access, and then I believe, yeah, and then they're coming in out of this front door hole in the screen, and some are up on this window, I believe up in here too, but things like the masonry has collapsed over time. So that's kind of just a general streetscape of the structure. I think that's the last one. And so we'd ask that you would move this structure forward to a public hearing, giving the owner time to come address it, and also the opportunity of the neighbors to come speak to you, and maybe we can seek a resolution. It's not staff's first inclination to go for demolition, but we do think a public hearing is warranted at this level, seeing the neighborhood response.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jim. I can't even get grass to grow in my yard, and they got grass growing on their roof, so that's quite an accomplishment, I'd say. But nonetheless, I just want the people to know that we don't take great desire in doing this. It's just one of those things we have to do once in a while. I know this is an older, established neighborhood, beautiful Victorian homes. You've mentioned before that's one of your preferences, too, so I know it stings you all the more. But at the same time, you're right, it takes daily maintenance and care for these old buildings to keep them up to speed and beautiful. So we just don't take great pleasure in doing this.
No, sir.
Anybody have any questions?
Just comment that we give them every opportunity. It's been a long period of time. We've known this problem, gone above and beyond as far as with patients. So I think we're at that point.
Great. Thank you.
And I do appreciate the citizens that came forward. You say 10 people on the petition
10,
signed in
yes.
the neighborhood.
Great
so
involvement, yes.
that's always a good sign to see that the neighborhood is supporting this too. I know they don't like to see a vacant lot sitting there either, but that certainly beats the current condition of the house we see before us. So I'll entertain a motion for item number 12.
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner.
I move that we approve the resolution to set the time, date, and place for the condemnation hearing.
Okay, is there a second on that?
I'll second it.
There is a second. Any other discussion? Let's take a roll call vote, please.
How do you vote, Commissioner Wygand?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
Mayor Skidmore?
I vote yes, too. The motion carries. Thanks, James. You bet. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 13.
Request for approval of ordinance for licensing mobile food vendors.
This ordinance establishes a process and requirements for licensing mobile food vendors in the city of Ottawa. And Amy Finch is going to talk to us about that.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm going to start with a little bit of a background. We've talked about this a few times at study session. Our intent with the mobile food vendor ordinance was to allow our mobile food vendors to operate more traditionally and move from place to place throughout the city instead of our current ordinance requires them to stay in one location. So they may pull a license to operate out of the Orscheln's parking lot with Orscheln's permission. Now they're going to be able to move around if the ordinance is adopted. We have visited with our active mobile food vendors that are currently operating in Ottawa and have received positive feedback on what we originally presented and then the changes we came back with at the previous study session. So the change that we most recently looked at was allowing a mobile food vendor to be on one property in any given day for an 8-hour period of time. That works for both of our current mobile food vendors. They operate a little bit differently. One focuses more on an early morning serving. One focuses more on lunch, so that allows them the flexibility to shift the time that they might be on any one property to serve their either breakfast or lunch. Do you have any questions for
Okay.
me?
Anybody have any questions? Amy, I appreciate the fact that you've talked to the various vendors to get their input on this as well, so they're all supportive of this, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they do collect sales taxes like every other
They do.
restaurant would
Yes.
without wheels?
As
Okay.
part of our application process, we collect their sales tax certificate, and then they are required to remit that.
It's very good. Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner,
I move that we approve the ordinance for licensing of mobile food vendors.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any other discussion on that? If not, we'll take a roll call vote on that too, please.
How do you vote, Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
Commissioner Wygand?
Yes.
Mayor Skidmore?
And I vote yes too. The motion carries. Thanks, Amy. Next, we have the presentation on, Park Additions Play Day. Is that Wendy?
Yes, sir. Thank you. As we announced on Monday, the city did receive a grant from the Department of Kansas Health and Environment. And so we're going to do a little presentation that's about that grant, as well as some other things that are the play day on Saturday, as well as just some other things over time. So we just thought while we had attention on this issue, we would go ahead. So, okay. So first, we want to suggest to people that you play anywhere, everywhere, all the time, and that includes adults, not just kids. So Saturday was our play day. That was our 9th play day since we began as a play city. When we hold play day in July, it's often hot, as you can imagine. So we have expanded our water kinds of games and features, and so there's a couple images here, and we had about 4 different kinds of slides that you could slide and splash and get wet, and that doesn't include the fire department at the end, who gets the hose out and does kind of a rain shower, which I'm sure that the park ground needed a little bit more of that this year than some years. In addition to that, we take advantage of some of our concrete areas to have other games such as Connect 4, some sliding games, bowling. There's also some arts and crafts things, face painting, chalk. One of the highlights, and I don't happen to have a photo because I probably was just laughing too much, was water balloons. There's new packaging with water balloons, if you haven't seen that, where you can fill up the water balloons and not have to tie yourself. And so last year we had, 500 water balloons, and they used them really fast. So this year I bought 1,300.
Wow.
They were still gone in less than an hour and a half. The kids have a lot of fun getting the adults. The fire department appears again to be their favorite target. And so with great glee, they managed to get the fire department. Now the fire staff actually was able to catch a number of those and turn them back. But it was a lot of fun to watch the kids play with the water balloons, as well as the adults, as I said. But we certainly appreciate the work that goes on for Play Day. The Play Task Force puts that on, and there's a committee of Brandon Stoltz, Chad Bruner, thank you. I knew I'd forget. I have it written down here, but it's a little dark. And Fonda Rose. And they assemble a lot of these games from either ORC or Fonda has some opportunity to get some of those, as well as some of those that we've purchased. We had our Imagination Playground in a box there again, and it was great fun to see kids using that as well. So I'm sure I didn't mention everything, but we probably had, I'd say 150 folks there this last weekend. Because it was forecast for rain and it was cloudy, we think that probably inhibited some of our numbers. However, for those that came, the cloud cover was a much more enjoyable opportunity to play without just really becoming kind of not feeling good. And we had some nice snacks and water available as well. So it was fun for all who were there. Lots of big smiles on the kids and families' faces, so we enjoyed that. While we were there, though, we also took advantage of the fact that we had Rotary and Playtask volunteers, and we built tables. So as I mentioned at the very beginning of this, we let you know on Monday that we had received a grant. Of course, I thought I had the ability to see up here, but I don't. So it was a grant of $4,425, and we had to match pretty close to about $3,000 in cash. The rest is in kind. So it's both the folks that are here helping assemble, as well as the equipment, supplies, and movement of those tables and replacement. And these tables are made of recycled tires. And so they're very durable. They're very, very heavy. It takes about 6 to 8 people to pick it up and move it, and you don't move it very far. So primarily they're moved with equipment. Our goal is to have every shelter in Forest Park have these tables, and I'm not sure if I've got a good image of it here, but with every 4 tables, included in every 4 is one that's accessible. And so the 2 sets this time will make 2 more shelters, have these tables as well as an accessible table in the shelter. And then there's 2 tables that will go to the teen park, along with the benches that we put there last year with the last grant. And the completion of these shelters puts us at half of the shelters in Forest Park when we've got them all placed. They're not all in the shelter yet. Will have these tables. And as one of our master plan goals, when we first adopted the parks plan, is to over time get all facilities of similar amenities. And so this was great. We had Rotary volunteers, as you can see, as well as the Play Task Force group, and they had some laughs, although not as much laughter was going on here as with the kids. It's a little bit of hard work to get those bolts and things in, and like I said, you had to have a lot of people there just to hold the stuff in place. So certainly want to call out Justin, DJ Welsh, because he did a lot of the grant work on this one and supervised some of his staff, as well as working with the volunteers to get this done on Saturday. And we will get our parks kind of all up to snuff. It's just going to take us a while. And I know that we get comments on some of our announcements, and I would just encourage the community to understand that we only get about $25,000 annually into the Special Parks Fund. The rest of it we do through fundraising. And it's always a little bit hard to read a comment after we've celebrated something that has taken some real effort, sweat, and tears, and then somebody comment, well, gosh, you need to go do this. Believe me, we know the list is long. We just need more people and more resources from the community to get it done. So for every time someone's tempted to make a slightly challenging comment, we'd love to see that reworded just a bit to a suggestion and to a willingness to help, because that's how we'll get this done. And we certainly appreciate KDHE giving us the funds to acquire these materials to assemble, and we intend to apply for more grants, but every time it takes match dollars. And we would love to do all 4 remaining shelters in the next grant round, but we're going to have community support to do that. You also asked for an update. There's my numbers on the grant money. And we did purchase those, I think I said, from Champlin Tire Recycling. But that's actually also who we contract with to remove tires when we collect them locally from the community. So they dump off tires that they would normally pay to get rid of. Maybe we should just ask those donors to help us fund these projects, because then we have to contract with somebody to actually come and dispose of them. It's not free. It's just free to the citizen in this case. But then we purchase the materials for those to come back. We wanted to update the community on the theme park. We do have phase 1 and phase 2 done. Those were the relocation of the former skate park, which is actually a lot of bicycle jumps as well, and people use it both ways, skating or bicycling. The construction, a half pipe, which we've never had before, and the pump track, which you can see there in the middle. Somebody's doing a great jump on the pump track. Those facilities are kind of on the south side, and then we built 3 different basketball courts. We only had one other basketball court in the community that was in a city park, and that's at Forest Park. And then we had a half court over at Don Woodward. So these 3 courts are brand new. They've been striped. You can see that we have some benches. Those are last year's grant functions, and then we'll add those 2 new. We still have the 3rd phase to go, and the 3rd phase, as initially visioned, was this kind of Ninja Warrior targeted improvements. I would offer to the public that unless we get that funding within the next 6 months, we won't be able to do all of this. We'll do what we can with the money we have. We currently have about $10,000. I've submitted a request for another $20,000. That leaves us about $30,000 short to get this 3rd phase in, and that doesn't include a shelter and some other things that over time we'd like to do. But we'd like to get this done and then come back and do some more fundraising over the next few years, but not as heavy pressure on the staff as it's currently taking. So we do hope to do this, but if there's folks out there that would like to see that 3rd phase happen right away, we sure could use their help in getting the rest of the funds collected. We do have in with the 2nd phase was a graffiti wall. That's been contracted, and that will be constructed, and it's actually much larger, and it'll be made of concrete, so in some ways that'll be fabulous. We have a couple other ideas we can do if we can't achieve all of these facilities that maybe are less expensive that we may do over time. And we're currently still working on the zip line. We had purchased something, but we're having difficulty making it accessible, in fact. And so we're trying to work through that. Again, if we can't do that, then we will take the funds that were donated to that and bring a new amenity to the teen park. But we are making progress, but we still need community support. But I thought while we were here, I'd show you some other things over time that we've done since we became a Play City. We've made a lot of improvements at Forest Park. We have an expression swing, which is this lower left corner. We've added things, the big adventure park in the middle. We added some climbing and new things on the north end of the park. This is still there, but it's been repainted by staff, and this as well. The top park, really, if we were doing something at Forest Park as far as playground, would be our next focus. In fact, if the community has leftover top facilities, those little, what are those, Sarah?
Yes.
Those little plastic buildings that look a little bit like this.
Little tykes.
Little tykes. If they have little tykes buildings, we'd love to even put that in there for our toddlers to play with in the short run. And sometimes people have those in their backyard, so we'd be happy to take some of those. In addition, we've got Heritage, Freedom, and Walton Park. Heritage and Freedom both have things we'd like to do there, particularly Freedom that does not have our accessible structures, but they did get a new climber there. And then Walton is our new park in a park desert, and we do have a shade structure over there now if you haven't been over there. But we had hoped over there to have a half-court basketball, and we still haven't gotten the funding for that. And we wanted a half-court or a full court at Freedom Park, and we don't have the funding for that either. Kansas Park, obviously all new equipment there, and still great fun over there, but we'd love to add another pair of swings. And then there's some pictures here of City Park. We did add new swings there to move them away from Skunk Run, and as you know, our park staff, or I'm sorry, our public works staff constructed the new bridge, and that was a great project as well. And then, as you know, we have added play structures and recycle our tires along the trails, as well as additional trails that our public works staff has built for the community. And so it's easy to see what's yet to be done, but we should never forget all of the work that has been done. So my thanks to Public Works for all the things that they do to give us good recreation amenities and health and fitness opportunities in Ottawa.
Thanks, Wendy. That was very good presentation. Appreciate that. I agree with you. All the help that we've had from the city staff as well. It's very appreciative. So good work, everybody. Thanks, Michael, too. Next would be item number 15.
Resolution establishing an economic development incentive policy for rural housing incentive districts, RHIDs.
Now, this is a new incentive tool for Ottawa to guide the establishment of districts that would allow for the developer to be reimbursed for infrastructure expenses with a property tax increment created by the housing development. And Wendy's back.
Yes, much more sober, these kinds of things, not quite so much fun.
All right.
This is an incentive district, and one of the questions I think Commissioner Wygan asked on Monday was RHID only available for low-income and income qualified units? And I thought that it was. Our council first thought that it was, but after doing some more investigation yesterday, he found that you can make that available to other developments. So in front of you, and if you don't want to take action on that, we understand. And in front of you is a modified Exhibit A that strikes the words renter-occupied, low-income, or income-qualified units. And it just would say then for developments containing a minimum of 10 units. But then underneath project eligibility, because we do think that it would be a factor based on our community incomes and our housing plan, that we would want to consider have some ability to make decisions based on whether they're including units. So when you look at housing as a whole, you can look at it across the country as there are sometimes communities that find themselves segregating by income. And that is not a good practice for a lot of good reasons. And so at least by having some, is this unit the place that you are being asked to redirect tax dollars back to a development, are they providing a public value to the whole community in doing that? And so by adding that sentence at the end, which is the inclusion of renter-occupied, low-income, or income-qualified units, you can at least consider that as a part of your decision-making when you're being asked to build, or I'm sorry, allow for a rural housing increment district project. It also might then guide the term that you might have for a project. So the only RHID project currently approved is for Prairie View. It was called Prairie Fire, but Prairie View. It was a 15-year term, which is maxed by the statutes. You may want to, if we were approached by somebody who was building $300,000 house units, for example, you might want to say, is there going to be included in that a unit that would be available for other people? Or you may just want to only incentivize it to a certain point, if you wanted to incentivize that at all. And certainly there are housing developments that have a mix. And oftentimes that is really the most advantageous for the community. But all of those things are speculative because we don't know yet what folks are all working on. We do have one other project that we have talked with about this, and that is Juniper Park. And so we will be bringing you Juniper Park soon, where we have it kind of partnered up with the stormwater decision making that we've still got pending. So you can either, I know the clerk is prepared for either of the RHID policies that we have before you. You just would need to define to her whether you want the one that you looked at on Monday or whether you want the revised one that we just supplied for you.
Okay. Any questions anybody have of Wendy?
I have a couple clarifications. Because the public hasn't had a chance to see the revised version that sits in front of us, I'm sure that that's going to be made available to anybody if they want to review that. But just want to clarify that with the item G on the project eligibility, that doesn't establish any base or any percentage that in which that there has to be low income or income qualified units within any proposal that is brought to us.
No, and really that just moved the language from the top down to the bottom. But it's a question to be answered, is really. And if they aren't providing any, fine. That's obviously it's their development, right, as a developer. It's just information to be shared with you so that you can use that as a consideration, if you want to, in your decision making. I would hope that they would also, they're required to tell us at what price are they, so that you can make some judgment about, is that moderate, is it a mix, what is it, what kind of housing? Because they would have to form this before they're at the point of actually constructing, obviously. So you wouldn't be able to see it or have an appraised value. You would be in anticipation of what range are they targeting for their housing development.
Sure. Any other questions anybody have?
Thank you.
What is the availability of funds usually? There is a limit, or is there?
That's a good question, actually. So for the rural housing increment districts, it's very much like a tax increment financing. There is an estimation based on what they've said those units would be valued, and then an understanding of what then that might appraise for, and it creates a cash flow, an increment projection. That's what would be available for the governing body to allow be redirected to the developer after it's built. So if we had a subdivision with 5 houses, all of them were 100,000, then it would be the mills associated with that 100,000 value. If it was a field before, that new 100,000 to be $500,000 increment that's associated with the mill. I'm not going to do that math, but let's say it's 1,000. They'd get 1,000 for up to 15 years per unit, or whatever that increment is created, if you redirect it. Now, you could say we're going to give you a percentage. You could say it's going to be only 10 years. There's a lot that would be done in the negotiation, but it's the increment generated by the project. But it also means that that increment is being redirected to them instead of to police, fire, parks, what have you, to the tax bases of the city, the county, and the school district. The 20 mills that is for state, that's collected by the state, is not affected. But the city, county, and school district taxes would be redirected back to the developer for infrastructure as an incentive to build.
Interest-free, is it?
The interest is usually a part of the discussion, and we generally don't pay interest with the increment. We don't offer that as part of the negotiation, but it is their funds that they have to put out, and then they get repaid. So it's a pay-as-you-go. That's a given. We're not going to front the money as an organization. We are not going to loan them any money in any way or allow our like bond rating or our bond capacity to be affected. This is, they do the development. It is their dollars. It costs them $1 million, let's say, but they have an opportunity to get the increment back. Prior to this availability, any housing development that's been done here in Ottawa, they pay the full bear of the infrastructure. And it's a good point, actually, to probably make, because sometimes when people say, well, how come I don't have a sidewalk and how come they do? That's because the developer who did their subdivision put it in. Now we require them, but we had a spell where we did not. Then when the homeowner is buying, they're paying for the land and the infrastructure it takes to serve that house, not just the construction of the house. So this is only to be back for the infrastructure-related expenses.
So I guess in essence, we're expanding the circle of inclusion with this amendment we're looking at,
Yes.
right? And that'd be more, okay, I've always. Anybody else have any other questions?
Thank you. I think that answers my questions, but, you know, it's interesting. The reason I kind of looked into what it's available for is, if you recall, gosh, it's been 20 years ago, probably Osage Street, between, 17th and 19th, developed very successfully. That's going to, in my opinion, we need to duplicate that somewhere, because we're in need of that quality of housing, but that's really more expensive. It's really expensive now to put in streets, sewers, gutters, and all of that, as well as build those houses. So this RHID thing could be accessible for redevelopment of a similar project like that was. And it seems to me like that is some of the kind of housing we need, as well as the low to moderate income housing, to keep our managers, our professionals, and those folks living here in Ottawa. Thank you.
Okay, well, so we do have an amended proposal before us. Do I have a motion to accept the amended proposal?
I would so move to,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, to amend the proposal.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any other discussion on this? If not, let's take a roll call, please.
How do you vote, Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
Commissioner Wygand?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Mayor Skidmore?
I vote yes, too. The motion carries. We'll get that signed. Thank you, Wendy, for all your work on that, too. Item number 16.
Recommendation by Neighborhood Revitalization Committee to add 1 commercial and 6 residential structures to the program.
The properties recommended are 125 East 2nd, 813 South Locust, 625 South Sycamore, 619 South Linwood, 711 North King, 315 East 5th, and 1035 South Main, and 749 South Tremont. Wow, any other places that are still available not on the list here, huh? All properties are within the established neighborhood revitalization district. Wendy?
This is actually a good mix of addresses, because there's a commercial project down here on 2nd with a 10-year rebate. There are 3 different projects that are owner occupied and initiated. There are 2 that are about folks doing renovations to sell, and 1 that is for potential rental occupancy. So a little bit of mix of everything from housing to commercial, and as you know, these projects are always evaluated by the committee, and then each of the governing boards, the city, county, and school district, have an opportunity to pass these, and this is a good program for all.
It really is. I agree, it's a great program. Anybody have any other questions on this? I entertain a motion on item 16 then.
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner?
I move that we approve the neighborhood revitalization properties as listed in item 16 on our agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There is a second. Any other discussion? Let's vote roll call, please.
How do you vote, Commissioner Wygand?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
Mayor Skidmore?
I vote yes, too. The motion carries. Thanks again, Wendy, for all your work, and for our representative. Is that Tom? Are you on that committee?
That would be me.
That's you, Sarah Kaler. Thank you for your work on that, too. That's great. Let's go on to report by city manager. Nothing? We'll go with our commissioner reports. Tom, you have anything?
Attended this Main Street organizational meeting last night, board meeting last night. They're familiar with our concerns about the program, the management, the ongoing process of working the downtown, using the city funds appropriately and responsibly and everything, and they are preparing a presentation for us in the coming weeks. So we had a good discussion. They are going to, they approved 2 board members, 2 new people joining the board last night. Tiffany Evans and Judy Foltz will be joining that board. I think will be a good addition. So anyway, good meeting, and we'll hear more from them coming days.
Okay. Thanks, Tom, for your contact with them as well. Sarah, anything?
None at this time.
Emily?
Today is actually my last regular commission meeting. I've been on the commission for almost 3 years now, and it's definitely not always the easiest job. There's a lot of information to cover every week, and people usually don't contact you because they're happy with something you did, so that's been interesting. But it's definitely been rewarding, and the times that I've been able to actually help people have made it worth it. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for all of your support.
I'll just conclude. Emily, thank you for all your years of service. If you ever move back to the community, you're certainly welcome to rejoin. Just don't go on the same ballot with me. I'm a little nervous about that. If you could wait. But nonetheless, I really appreciate your service and your input at our meetings. And let's give Emily a hand when we appreciate her service. The other reports I have would be that July 18th, we got a luncheon today at the SD 290 office. Our study session on Monday is canceled, and we'll meet again on the 30th. And then we've got a regular meeting on the 1st of August. So if there's nothing else before the commission meeting today at 10:31, we are adjourned.